Did you know that one of the historically oldest objects in your home may be your welcome mat? Turns out we've been using welcome mats for thousands of years. Archaeologists tell us that humans first started using floor coverings 28,000 years ago. And we started weaving them into mats in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. And not long afterwards, we had them in front of our thresholds so that people could wipe off their feet and their shoes before they entered a building. Now, of course, the Romans had their own kind of unusual turn on this. The Romans didn't have those floor mats. They had tiles along the thresholds of their buildings. And on those tiles, they had the most gruesome figures you could imagine. Their tiles were designed to scare off any sort of evil spirits or anyone that would come against them. Very appropriate for the longest running human empire. The Romans had their own take on how to welcome. But mostly, we have used welcome mats for a very long time. And while they are certainly not as popular as VJ's Trader Joe's bags, they serve an important function. And in many ways, they remind us of the way in which Jesus washed his disciples' feet. The other thing that we frequently do when we welcome someone, in addition to having a welcome mat, is that we offer them a cold drink. We offer them a glass of water. Anywhere around the world, people will welcome each other with some sort of drink. Some places in the world it's tea, other places it's juice, but generally when we welcome folks, there's a welcome mat and a glass of cold water. And Jesus today, as he finishes off his instructions to his disciples, says, if you remember nothing else, offer a cup of cold water to these little ones. Just a cup of water. We've been reading the 10th chapter of Matthew. And you may remember through this chapter, Jesus has been calling and then sending forth his disciples. So 2 weeks ago, we had the original 12 apostles who were called. And then afterwards, Jesus tells them that when they go out into the world, don't bring any money or any extra shoes or any extra clothes. And if you get somewhere and they're not open to what you're talking about, shake the dust off your sandals and move on to the next town. A pretty tough message that he gives to them. But it only got tougher last week when Jesus said, if you want to save your life, you have to lose it. And those who lose their life for his sake will save it. He said, father will rise up against son, and mother against daughter, and mother-in-law against daughter-in-law. It was a really challenging message he had for us and for the disciples. I'm so thankful it was VJ that was preaching. So Jesus concludes all those instructions today with these couple of verses that we hear, really just 2 verses. The second of which ended with this idea that when in doubt, just give somebody a cup of water. Jesus recognizes that the most welcoming thing that we might be able to do is offer one another a cold drink. And Jesus knows this not only because the Middle East is an arid place where there's not a lot of free flow of water, but also because water has an incredibly significant role in Judaism and in our tradition. You'll remember that John the Baptist was baptizing people with water in the River Jordan. You may know that in the Jewish practice, there are many rituals that involve cleaning with clear water. And of course, the very first line of the book of Genesis, when God starts the creation of the world, God comes across the water. So when Jesus is talking about giving a cup of water, he's talking about something very physical, but also something very deeply spiritual. Jesus knows what welcome looks like, and he's giving the disciples and us the most basic guarantee of how we might be able to do it. Jesus recognizes that in welcoming one another, in the grace of welcoming, we truly live into the commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves. The theologian Richard Rohr points out that Jesus doesn't say, love your neighbor as much as yourself. Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus is equating us and our neighbor as equals. And that's based on his theology that we are all connected, that a bit of God resides in each one of us, so that when I see the God in you and you see the God in me, we are connected as God's beloved community. We are connected as the people of God. And if we are connected in that deep and transcendent way through the divine, how can we not offer each other a cup of water? And so much more. When Jesus is describing in the first line of our passage today, when he says that whoever welcomes you, welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me, welcomes the one who sent me, the welcome that Jesus is implying there is more than just a cup of water. Jesus is suggesting that those who welcome his disciples will provide food and shelter, but most importantly, they will offer an open mind where they can hear the new, radically new theology that his disciples will be proposing. They will be espousing ideas that will be completely foreign to many of the communities in which they visit. And so when Jesus is envisioning welcoming, he's envisioning an open mind as well. When Jesus recognizes that this kind of welcome is not always easy to offer, that sometimes it is easier to be welcoming than to be welcomed. Sometimes it is easier to give the glass of water than to receive that glass of water. Because I know what's in the glass of water that I give, I'm not so sure about the one that I receive. So Jesus recognizes that when we are welcomed in the way that the disciples are about to be, that there's huge vulnerability in that. That as they go into these communities, they don't know if people are going to provide food and shelter for them. They certainly don't know if their ideas are going to be well received. And so they know that they're at risk. Jesus knows that they feel vulnerable. And so he reminds them that whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. He reminds them, and he reminds us, that fundamentally all of us have been welcomed. That the debt has already been paid, that Jesus is already there welcoming us into the family of God. That God is there welcoming, inviting all of us to the table. But the disciples and us, we need a little encouragement sometimes. Not only to have the grace of being welcoming, but having the courage to be welcomed. So often it is easier to be the caregiver than to receive the care. Sometimes it's easier to be loving than to be loved. And yet Jesus' message to us today is that both are equally important if we are to be his disciples. That we must be welcoming and be welcomed. It's the reason that I always say here that everyone deserves pastoral care. Because so frequently I find that in congregations, the people who do the most caregiving will be the ones most likely to forget their own care. And that pastoral care is for all. Because we are called to care for one another in that way, to be welcoming and to be welcomed. Not always an easy proposition, but the work that we do together. And that's part of what is behind the message that Paul has in his letter to the Romans today. As VJ mentioned last week, Paul did not set up that community in Rome. And they're 2,500 miles away from Jerusalem. So the Romans, as Roman Christians, are really trying to sort things out. And in particular, it was challenging for them because the Romans were highly suspicious of those early Christians. They were highly suspicious of them because they knew that they followed some kind of faith that was based on love. And that was foreign to the Romans. Even though the Greeks had these 5 different hierarchies of love, culminating in agape love, that the Romans didn't share that affinity for love. The Romans were focused on power and dominance, control. They had an empire to control. Love was sort of somewhere down on the side for them. So when this early Christian community emerges there, all focused around love, they don't really know what to think of these people. But they're highly, highly suspicious. And as a result, those early Christians are heavily persecuted by the Romans and largely have to operate underground. And so Paul writes to them to encourage them to know that they have been welcomed, That no matter what the Romans may say about them, the suspicions they have of them, the kind of cast that they put on the love that they share, that they have been welcomed, that they have found salvation, that the debts have been paid, and that they can live into the welcoming and welcomed that Jesus lays out for them. And it's a message that we carry with us as well as people who live also in a time that tends to focus more on dominance and power and control than on love. We also live in a time where that agape love that the Greeks had is not necessarily a top social priority for us either. But as disciples, we are called to a different way. We are called to a way that looks past that and lives in a time of welcome and being welcomed, despite a world that doesn't always see it that way. So, Trinity, as we move forward, we're called to offer one another a cup of water. A dusty welcome mat and a cup of water is where it starts. The way in which we can demonstrate what it looks like to be welcoming and to be loving, and what it looks like to be welcomed. It's when we do that work that we show the world what it looks like to be loving and to be loved, to be cared for and to care, to have the courage to be welcomed and the grace to be welcoming. So as we go forth this week as the people of God, may we both have the grace to be welcoming and the courage to be welcomed. Amen.